time of cyanotic presentation. See, it is a cyanotic disease. So, cyanosis, when it will come, usually this is the time these patients will be diagnosed.
Subscribe and press the bell icon so you never miss an update from PrepLadder.
Now, let us talk about the clinical features. Now, first of all, when we talk about clinical features, what is the time of cyanotic presentation? See, it is a cyanotic disease. So, cyanosis, when it will come, usually this is the time these patients will be diagnosed. Now, we find that some of these patients are found to have cyanosis even in the neonatal period. But these are the patients who are having either a severe form of TOF or they are having TOF with pulmonary atresia. The vast majority others will have presentation happening, cyanosis will appear in the post-neonatal period. And that is why TOF is not the most common cause of cyanosis in the neonatal period. So, others will appear in the post-neonatal period. It can vary anywhere from around 6 weeks to 6 months. This is the age during which maximum patients of TOF will develop cyanosis. So, these patients will have a baseline cyanosis. We find that majority of patients, most commonly, they have a sleeping, calm condition. If you check the saturation of blood, it is between 80 to 88%. So, the cyanosis is usually mild and becomes prominent only when the child is exerting. Now, what are the clinical features that you find in these patients? According to all standard books, the most common feature in these patients is exertional dyspnea. When the child starts playing around or when the child starts exercising, dyspnea appears. That is the most common presentation. So, exertional dyspnea is the most common feature. As age advances, these patients will develop clubbing as well. Clubbing of the digits will develop. Clubbing of the digits, they can develop in the fingers also, they can develop in the toes also. And other than that, these patients will, as age advances, they will also develop features of failure to thrive. Malnutrition features will appear or chronic malnutrition because it is a hypoxic state, tissues are not receiving hypoxemia, so there will be failure to thrive and chronic protein energy malnutrition. And in the first 2 years of life, there will be acute complication, the typical so-called TET spells, where there will be sudden increase in the cyanosis of the patients. So, TET spell, more details I have discussed in complication because it is actually a complication. So, I will be talking about TET spell separately. So, these are the cyanotic presentations that you need to, these are the features that you need to know. A very characteristic thing about exertional dyspnea is that whenever dyspnea happens, it will be a typical history. The child starts playing and gets dyspneic. Very soon, and cyanosis also slightly worsens, the lips and the nail beds, they become blue. Child very early in life realizes that if I sit in squatting position, my dyspnea will improve. So the question arises, what is squatting position? Look at this person. This is what you call as squatting position. So on sitting in squatting position, there is a improvement in dyspnea and cyanosis in the patient of TOF. This is considered to be a very characteristic depiction. Now we know that it can be seen in some other varieties, other conditions also, but traditionally it is, if you have a case of Tetralogy of Fallot, they will usually mention history of squatting in these patients. So there will be improvement in dyspnea and cyanosis in TOF and the child will start playing again. Why squatting helps? Now, it is the exact mechanism for this is not entirely clear, but usually when the person sits in squatting, two things happen. First, when he is sitting in squatting, can you see that there is a trapping of venous blood in the lower limbs? So, there will be trapping of venous blood in the lower limbs. This will lead to pooling of the blood in the lower limbs, and so that venous blood will be reaching less to the right side of heart. So there will be decreased venous return to right side of heart. Basically, your preload is decreasing to the right side, and this will lead to slight transient fall in the right ventricle pressure. So transient fall in the right ventricle pressure. At the same time, because the patient is sitting like this, we will find that there is compression of the systemic lower limb arterial vessels, which usually leads to back pressure changes, and eventually there is a rise in the systemic vascular resistance, and this leads to slight increase in the LV pressure. So the afterload tends to increase on the left side. And so why was the shunt operating? Because right-sided pressure was slightly more than left-sided pressure, right? But now what you have done is you have decreased the RV pressure, increased the LV pressure. So now because the pressures have changed, so your right to left shunt will decrease. So what you will find in these patients is overall there will be slight fall in the right to left shunt on sitting in squatting position. That is why these patients develop transient improvement on sitting in squatting position. Before again we move further towards the signs of tetralogy of Fallot, there is again a confusion which arises in students' mind. On one aspect, I am saying that right to left shunt operates because right ventricle pressure is more than left ventricle pressure. On the other hand, I am saying that VSD shunt murmur does not operate because there is equalization of systolic pressure. So people get confused, sir, why are two different things being said? See, understand, right ventricle pressure is always slightly more than the left ventricle pressure. Due to large VSD, right ventricle is easily able to, unload its burden into the systemic circulation. If you check the overall mean systolic pressures, then the pressures of RV and LV will be almost similar. There is slight increase in the RV pressure than LV pressure in peak systole, and that is the time during which the right to left shunt happens. Right to left shunt happens not into the left ventricle but into the aorta, and that is why these two terms which I have spoken earlier, they are not, nothing in them is contradictory. When you listen to this video again, you will realize that the things which I am talking about, they all make complete sense. But people, again, I keep interacting with students and I do get such queries. So this is my answer to that query before you ask me on Facebook or you mail me. So this is regarding clinical features of TOF. Moving further, what are the signs in tetralogy of Fallot? First of all, you will find that when S1, the first heart sound will be found to be normal in most of these patients. The second heart sound is usually found to be single. Why single? Only A2 component is heard. In case of mild tetralogy of Fallot, the P2 component is very faint, inaudible, whereas in moderate to severe TOF, due to decreased pulmonary blood flow and decreased flow across the pulmonary valve, the P2 is inaudible, and so practically what we hear is only A2 in these patients. Talking about murmurs, do you hear a murmur? Yes, we do. There is no shunt murmur in tetralogy of Fallot. But the murmur we hear in these patients is ejection systolic murmur. It is usually heard in the left, across the left sternal border. Across the left sternal border, it is heard. And we usually, Parks talks about that in case of infundibular stenosis, it is usually heard on the lower aspects of the sternal border, whereas in case of purely valvular stenosis, it is slightly higher placed. But this is something which is more academic, and on auscultation, all we hear is ejection systolic murmur. Some of these patients may have ejection clicks, but ejection clicks, they are plus or minus. They may or may not be present. And about this ejection systolic murmur, there are a few things that you need to understand. Why is the ejection systolic murmur happening at all? The ejection systolic murmur, if you try to see, this is the normal person, okay? This is the normal person. So, blood is moving freely across the pulmonary artery, across the valve, so there is no murmur getting produced. Let us think of tetralogy of Fallot. In tetralogy of Fallot, you will have this thing happening. So, this is your narrowing which is happening. So, you will have narrowing like this, right? Because of the narrowing, now whenever blood will move, it will be moving with a turbulence, and because of this, this is the infundibular stenosis which I have shown here, the hypertrophied muscle, and because of this will produce a ejection systolic murmur. Ejection systolic murmur may or may not be associated with thrill, and the grade of this murmur is usually 3 to 5. So, it is a systolic murmur, grade 3 to 5 that is heard. Now, what is the intensity of this murmur proportional to? There is a controversial MCQ asked on this, and so we need to understand what is the intensity of murmur proportional to. To make this concept more clear, again I will make a handmade diagram here. Let us consider 3 varieties. Mild TOF. The severity of TOF is dependent upon severity of right ventricle outflow tract obstruction. So, we have 3 forms: mild, moderate and severe. In mild form, you have obstruction like this. In moderate form, you have obstruction like this. In severe form, you have obstruction like this. Now, in mild TOF, there will be a faint murmur. Why? Because most of the blood is able to go without turbulence. The obstruction is not significant enough. In moderate TOF, there will be significant turbulence as blood will flow through the narrowing. A point will come where the murmur will become very loud. Suppose the obstruction becomes even further, or there is a valvular atresia. What will happen? No flow will happen. There is no flow. Because there is no flow, murmur will disappear. What does it mean? So, what it means is, usually intensity of this ejection systolic murmur, intensity of this murmur in tetralogy of Fallot is directly proportional to the degree of right ventricle outflow tract obstruction. However, once it reaches a maximum intensity, any further increase in obstruction, that is the right ventricle outflow tract obstruction, will lead to paradoxical decrease in the murmur intensity. And so, the intensity of murmur is usually directly proportional to degree of outflow obstruction. In severe TOF, it becomes inversely proportional as well, right? So, as obstruction increases, murmur intensity increases. At one point, it becomes maximum, then it starts decreasing. That is why in some hypercyanotic spells or TOF with pulmonary atresia, you will not have a murmur audible. Disappearance of a previously heard murmur is one of the signs of patient developing or soon to develop hypercyanotic spell, right? So, this is a very, very important thing. NEET PG level also, NEET super specialty and Central Institute, not NEET, Central Institute super specialty level, you have questions being asked on this. AIIMS examiners are particularly very fond of asking this particular concept. Moving further, this is the summary of what I told you. So, you have S1, S2 and S3, mild, moderate, severe TOF. So, in mild TOF, you may be able to hear a P2, but it is usually faint. In moderate and severe, you will find that there is no P2 sound which is heard, only a single heart sound is heard. And ejection clicks will be audible in severe TOF, and this is the murmur intensity. Usually, this is the murmur intensity that we find: mild TOF, moderate TOF, severe TOF. And if we go further and we talk about cyanotic spell, you will find that there will be either a no murmur or a murmur like this, which is not good enough to be heard, right?